Right, let's talk about American ports. Specifically, let's talk about the current, frankly bewildering situation where they are, in some cases, looking emptier than a politician's promises the day after an election. It's a scene of eerie calm where there should be bustling activity. As of this month, May 2025, an astonishing number of ships, we're talking over 200, if you can believe MSNBC News, are reportedly stuck, bobbing about like confused rubber ducks in a bathtub that's suddenly run out of water. This isn't just a minor hiccup like finding a rogue raisin in your cookie when you were expecting chocolate chip. No, this is the entire cookie factory grinding to a halt, and it's a massive flashing red light for the US economy, signaling that something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. Now, you might be thinking, John, how did we get here? Weren't ports supposed to be, full of things? And you'd be absolutely right to ask. This isn't some act of God unless God suddenly developed a keen interest in disrupting global trade through targeted maritime inactivity. Instead, what we're seeing is a direct consequence of a series of, let's call them bold decisions emanating from the Trump administration. The current desolation at these vital economic gateways, with over 25% of weekly service loops cancelled in late April and early May, isn't just bad luck. It's a symptom of a much larger, more chaotic picture. It's the kind of chaos that makes you wonder if the person in charge is navigating by a magic 8-ball. The immediate impact of these ghost ports, these maritime graveyards, is, to put it mildly, deeply concerning. Think about it. Every one of those delayed or cancelled ships represents a cascade of broken promises. Goods not reaching shelves, components not arriving at factories, and businesses teetering on the brink because their entire operational model relies on a predictable flow of international trade. Shipping volumes at key locations like the Port of Portland have plummeted by 50% for exports, and even the mighty Port of Los Angeles saw a 17% decline. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the very lifeblood of commerce slowing to a trickle, and the anxiety that spreads with it is palpable. So, what we have is a situation where the arteries of American trade are clogged, or, in some cases, eerily bypassed. Vision reported a staggering 43% week-over-week decrease in containers for the week ending April 28, 2025, which is the shipping equivalent of your heart deciding to take most of the month off. This isn't just a temporary blip. It's a full-blown crisis that demands a closer look at the policies and pronouncements that have steered us into these decidedly troubled waters. It's a complex mess of tariffs, alleged labor shortages, and political posturing that has created a perfect storm, leaving America's economic coastline looking alarmingly exposed and vulnerable. Let's dive into the murky waters of This Is Happening. A significant part of this maritime malaise can be traced back to President Trump's enthusiastic, shall we say, embrace of tariffs, particularly those aimed at China. We're talking sweeping tariffs, with some on Chinese goods reportedly soaring up to an eye-watering 145%. And if that wasn't enough to make your average importer break out in a cold sweat, there's been talk of an 80% levy on Chinese goods. The stated goal, as always, is America first, but the immediate result seems to be America's ports last, as imports take a nosedive and supply chains buckle under the strain of these economic shockwaves. It's like trying to win a race by shooting your own tires out. But tariffs, as disruptive as they are, aren't the only villain in this portside drama. The US supply chain was already creaking under the pressure of a post-pandemic surge in demand for goods. Everyone suddenly wanted everything all at once, and our existing port infrastructure, frankly, wasn't built for that kind of Black Friday-esque stampede every single day. Companies, in a desperate bid to avoid the impending tariffs, also pulled forward huge volumes of shipments, creating an initial influx that choked the system, only for it to be followed by the current eerie silence as the tariff walls went up. It's a classic case of feast or famine, or perhaps more accurately, a feast followed by a politically induced famine. Then there's the human element, or rather, the lack thereof in some critical areas. We're hearing about significant labor shortages across the logistics and transportation sectors. You need people to unload the ships, people to drive the trucks, and people to manage the warehouses. When there aren't enough of them, or when the reduced cargo volumes make work schedules unreliable, the entire system starts to seize up like an old engine. Thousands of dock workers and truck drivers are now understandably worried about their jobs, as the slowdown in port traffic means less work, less pay, and a whole lot more uncertainty. It's a vicious cycle where policy decisions end up hitting the very people they're ostensibly supposed to protect. So, you have this delightful cocktail of aggressive trade policies, overwhelmed infrastructure, and a workforce under immense pressure. It's not just one thing. It's everything all at once, creating bottlenecks that ripple through the entire economy. Delays in goods become the norm, costs go up because scarcity is a fantastic price inflator, and economic uncertainty becomes the soup of the day, every day. This isn't just about ships sitting idle. It's about a fundamental disruption to how America does business, and the consequences are far-reaching and, frankly, quite alarming for anyone who enjoys, say, buying things. Now, you might expect a leader facing such a clear and present economic disruption to be perhaps a tad concerned. You might anticipate calls for emergency meetings, strategic recalibrations, or at the very least, a solemn acknowledgement of the problem. But no, not this time. In a display of what can only be described as truly breathtaking optimism, or perhaps a complete detachment from reality, President Trump has suggested that these emptying US ports are, and I quote, a good thing. Yes, you heard that right. During a press briefing, he reportedly stated, "That means we lose less money," and further asserted that China was making over $1 trillion and the US would be better off without doing business with China. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. This, predictably, has not gone down well with people who actually understand how economies trade or, work. Former Representative Katie Porter, for instance, didn't mince her words, calling Trump's economic policies, including these tariffs and trade deals, nuts and profoundly detrimental to American families. And she's not alone. Gene Soroka, the executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, a man who presumably knows a thing or two about port traffic, predicted a grim 35% drop in incoming cargo volume for early May 2025. This isn't the sound of an economy winning, it's the sound of an economy having a rather public and painful breakdown. A key moment that underscores the severity of this crisis was the recent and highly disruptive closure of the Port of Los Angeles. This wasn't due to a holiday, it was reportedly due to a potent combination of labor disputes and overwhelming logistical backlogs, problems exacerbated by the chaotic trade environment. When one of the nation's, indeed the world's busiest ports has to shut its doors, even temporarily, it's a 5-alarm fire for the supply chain. It's a tangible, unmissable sign that the system is failing. And declaring it a good thing is like telling someone their house is burning down, but hey, at least they'll save on heating bills. It's an insult to the intelligence of everyone affected. The sheer dissonance between the administration's narrative and the on-the-ground reality is staggering. While the White House spins tales of economic masterstrokes, businesses are struggling, workers are facing uncertainty, and consumers are bracing for impact. The claim that losing massive amounts of trade is somehow beneficial defies basic economics. It's like a doctor proudly announcing a successful surgery where the patient unfortunately died, but look at how little blood was lost towards the end. This isn't just a difference of opinion, it's a dangerous disregard for the complex machinery of global commerce and the livelihoods that depend on it. So what's the final bill for this grand experiment in port emptying? Well, it's hefty, and everyone gets to chip in whether they like it or not. The slowdown and the issues at US ports, directly linked to these aggressive tariffs on China, are already translating into significant economic challenges. We're looking at potential job losses, not just for dock workers and truckers, but in industries that rely on imported goods and components. And get ready for it, the spectre of goods shortages and almost inevitably increases in the price of pretty much everything you buy. Because when it costs more to get things into the country, guess who pays for it? That's right, you do. Surprise. The impact on daily life is where this really hits home. It's not just abstract economic theory. It's the frustration of seeing emptier shelves in your local stores, or finding that the price of that appliance you needed has suddenly shot up. Businesses, especially smaller ones, are caught in the crossfire, struggling with unreliable supply chains and rising costs, making it harder for them to compete or even survive. Major American retailers have reportedly even stopped shipments from China, which might sound like a patriotic win to some until you realize that simply means fewer goods and higher prices for domestic consumers. This is the reality of trade wars. They're not easily won, and they're certainly not without significant collateral damage to your own side. Beyond the immediate domestic pain, there are the broader implications for America's standing in the global economy. Merchandise trade between the US and China, a colossal $439 billion in Chinese exports to the US in 2024 alone, is now teetering on the edge of collapse if these tariffs remain. West Coast ports like Long Beach and Oakland are already experiencing a precipitous drop in cargo volume. This isn't just about one trading partner, it signals instability and unpredictability, making other countries think twice about their own trade relationships with the US. It's a surefire way to isolate yourself economically, which, historically speaking, has rarely been a pathway to prosperity. In conclusion, the empty ports crisis, as it's rightly being called, is a multifaceted disaster of our own making. It's a stark illustration of how policy decisions, particularly those driven by simplistic slogans rather than sound economic principles, can have devastating real-world consequences. While the administration might try to paint this as a strategic victory, the reality for American businesses, workers, and consumers is one of increased costs, heightened uncertainty, and a tangible decline in economic well-being. So next time you hear that empty ports are a good thing, perhaps ask who they're good for. Because from where most of us are standing, it looks an awful lot like a bad deal, wrapped in a terrible idea, sold with a straight face, and that truly is something else.